What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. And this one is the Game Week 13 preview. So I'm going to go through a couple of the Champions League games from last night and talk through what that means for FPL moving forward. And then I'm going to answer a bunch of your questions to hopefully help you make your decisions ahead of the deadline on Friday. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And check out Fantasy Football Hub's Green Friday deal. They got 30% off at the moment and a 30-day free trial. You can sign up using the link in the description below. And I'll show you some of the tools later in this video. So let's start with Man City's game against Feyenoord in the Champions League last night. Unfortunately, I didn't get to watch any of the games. Sometimes life does get in the way. But we can still talk about the result, the lineup, and what that might mean for FPL moving forward. Now, in terms of the back four, it was Rico Lewis inverting from right back. Then you had Akanji, Ake, and Vardiol. So they are starting to get a few players back fit. I think Ake will be someone that really bolsters that defence in general. On Rico Lewis, I believe he has started every single Champions League game so far. And that bodes well if you're an owner and hoping that he starts in game week 14 like I am. This week doesn't really matter, right? It's Liverpool where you're not expecting a clean sheet anyway. And by the way, if you need to make a defender transfer and you've got a spare move to get rid of Lewis, I think that's perfectly fine as well. But if you're going to hold on to him, because the Forest game in 14 is midweek, I think there is a chance that he will start that game as well. I suspect that Kyle Walker will be back in for the Liverpool game, and then Rico Lewis has got a good chance, not a guarantee, of playing against Forest. So just something to keep an eye on. Nobody is buying Rico Lewis right now, that's for sure. In terms of the result, I saw a tweet going around, I think it was from John McKenzie, that Man City at the point of being 3-0 up had only conceded 0.18 expected goals, which is amazing. But then they go and concede 3 and they draw the game 3-3. Now, I think it's fair to say that Man City are in a bad spell right now. They're a fragile team they can be gotten at. They're still creating a lot of chances, right? They've just gone and scored 3 goals, but they're also conceding too many as well. And it's just like everything is going wrong for them at the moment. As much as I think now is not the worst time to play Man City, and we're going to talk about captaincy later on for Mo Salah, I don't think they're as bad as the results have shown. I think we will see improvements from 14 onwards. And so if you've got Man City players, I think there is reason to be hopeful. The idea of buying any right now, though, that is a bit more difficult. Like Vardiol, for example, he's putting up really good numbers in the Premier League so far. It's 0.24 expected goal involvement per 90, which is excellent. He's also the third highest scoring defender in the game behind Van Dijk and Gabriel, despite the lack of clean sheets. Like third highest scoring defender, and he's only got 2 clean sheets. If they can pick up a little bit, he will do well from 40 and onwards. The minutes will still be good. But the idea of buying him, I think you've got to be a certain type of FPL manager to do that, to forget everything that's gone so far and just hope that he will pick up more points over like 14 all the way up to 22, which he probably will. So if you've got Vardiol, I do genuinely think there's a good reason to hold on to him, especially if you don't have the luxury of transferring him out. I wouldn't take a hit or anything like that. Buying him is a bit more difficult. Otherwise, Haaland can score goals, but seemingly only in the Champions League right now. If you've got him, I've spoken a lot of times at this point about whether or not you should sell into Salah. You can go and watch the early thoughts video on Monday if you want to recap. But yeah, not the worst time to play Man City. I think if Liverpool can get this win, then I don't think it's a case of the title is theirs, but what a great position to be in. And right now, I don't think anyone's expecting Man City to win that game. So let's talk about Arsenal next. The first thing to mention is that Gabriel went off towards the end of the game, and after the match, Arteta said that he felt some discomfort. I think they were about to sub on Sterling and make a different transfer instead, but they had to bring Gabriel off, so Sterling didn't come on. Now, obviously, that's a little bit of a worry moving forward, but from what people have said who are watching the game, they think it was probably more like cramp or fatigue, and that's why he had to come off. And on the bench, he was kind of laughing and joking around with other players. So probably not something to be massively concerned about. It would have been nice if the scoreline was a bit different. Like Arsenal were absolutely cruising that game. They were never going to lose it. So it was easy to bring a player like Gabriel off. If it was 1-1, they were defending a 1-0 lead. I wonder whether he would have come off in that situation. So if you've got him, he's only just gone up to 6.2 million. I would not panic. And if you're thinking about buying him, just wait until closer to the deadline. You've already missed the price rise at this point. You might as well wait for more information. I know that Arteta probably isn't going to give us a great update on Friday, but sometimes information comes out from journalists which will point or at least give an indication of whether he's going to play or not. If Gabriel's going to be out for a while, I'm pretty sure that news would come out. So still looking like the best defender to own from Arsenal moving forward. Absolutely nailed on, and great goal threat from set pieces. And he scored again last night, right? Just showing how good he is in the air. So I would definitely want to keep him. In general, Arsenal now beaten Forest 3-0, Sporting 5-1 in the Champions League, away from home as well. That's a pretty impressive result, even though obviously Sporting have lost Mbuemo now. I don't think it's a coincidence that they've got pretty much their first 11 available and Odegaard is back. I think Odegaard makes a difference both in attack and defence. Their press is just much better with him in the team. And creatively, he's the best player in that team, right? I mean, Saka's very creative as well, but Odegaard's kind of the spark. And I didn't watch the game last night, but I watched the game against Forest, and Saka and Odegaard down that right side, they just couldn't, like most teams will find that really difficult to cope with. So I think we should expect moving forward Arsenal to be much better than they probably were in the first maybe 10, 11 game weeks, even though they were still good then. But I think they get even better now with Odegaard back. And with the fixture run they've got, I can't see any reasons to not be on some kind of a triple up. Like they basically, I think I've said this before, they don't have a bad fixture run really for the rest of this season, right? The worst spell is probably 19 to 24, where they play Brentford away, Brighton away, Spurs at home, Villa at home, Wolves away, and Man City at home. But if you've got one or two attackers, they are not fixtures to be scared of. You wouldn't transfer your Arsenal players out for that run. And if you've got defenders, okay, maybe it's going to be difficult because there's so many away games and the home games are against City and Spurs. But if I've got two Arsenal defenders, I'm probably just going to play them in all of those games because they can get me, saves if it's Raya, goals if it's Gabriel, assists and goals if it's Timber or someone like that. And you've still got the likes of Brentford away, Villa at home, Wolves away, where there is possibility of a clean sheet. And they're great at home as well. So who knows if they could go and keep a clean sheet against Spurs or Man City. It's possible. And because the defence is so good, there's just no point wasting transfers, taking them out and back in. Now, obviously, if they get injured, it's a different story. But basically, I would be on a triple up. If you're asking me what the best triple up to be on is, it's Saka and Gabriel, definites for me. And then you pick one of Timber or Raya, depending on what the rest of your structure looks like. If you're happy with the rest of your defence, try and get David Raya in. If you need a goalkeeper transfer, then Raya is probably the one to go for. As much as I think the triple up is worth it, I don't think it's like essential, by the way, just to kind of point that out. Don't go ripping up your team and taking -4s, -8s to get on triple Arsenal. But if you're not already there, that should probably be something you're thinking about over the next few weeks. Just quickly on Timber versus Saliba. I did speak about Timber yesterday. Saliba is obviously the safe pick, but he's not really having many chances from set pieces, whereas Timber got an assist last night. He was close to a goal against Forest as well. If he can stay fit and the minutes are good, which they should be, he's going to be better than Saliba, and he's cheaper as well. So that's who I would look at. And just one final point before someone puts it in the comments. I know this is maybe not their exact first choice 11. Ben White would probably play quite a lot if he was fit. But I think with the players available right now, this is basically first choice. Yes, Jesus might play instead of Havertz sometimes. Trossard can play on the left instead of Martinelli. Marino might come in at some point. But that is pretty much a first choice 11 that we saw last night. And that's going to mean plenty of goals and plenty of clean sheets moving forwards. Just quickly on Havertz, he was back in the team. I would still expect him to start way more often than he doesn't. And I know he got benched for Jesus against Forest, but I'm not sure that's necessarily a sign of things to come. Would I buy Havertz right now? Probably not. But if I had him, I'd be tempted to keep hold of him. So let's get into some of your questions. Should we look to shift from Mbuemo? And if so, are Gordon and Bowen both good options to go for? Now, I said this on Sunday's knee-jerk stream. I would spend precisely 0 minutes thinking about selling Mbuemo in Game Week 13 specifically. Maybe this question is geared more towards Game Week 14 onwards, but I know some people are frustrated with Mbuemo and thinking about getting rid of him this week. I just wouldn't do it. Leicester at home is too good of a fixture to bother spending a transfer on someone like Mbuemo. I know the last 3 fixtures haven't been great. Fulham away, Bournemouth at home, Everton away, just 1 assist, and only 0.09 XG total. Hardly any goal threat whatsoever. It's not great, but it's also only 3 fixtures. The stats over the season have been pretty good. And just a reminder, before Dominic Solanke played Aston Villa at home, what was going around? He's only got 0.1 XG total over the last 3 matches. He's basically playing as a central defensive midfielder. What does he do? Go and score 2 goals. 3 games is not enough to say that Mbuemo is a bad option. And even if Leicester have got a new manager by that point, that is still a really good fixture. I would not sell him for pretty much anyone. Even if you've got the money to go to Saka and a spare transfer, you could do it, but I'm not sure I would. Because going into game week 14, you could have 2 transfers instead. You can still make the Mbuemo to Saka switch if you want. But if something else happens in your team, you can just deal with that instead. Saka is great, but so is Mbuemo this week. So let's say you have my team, and for argument's sake, forget that I've got triple Arsenal defence, and I wanted to do Mbuemo to Saka. I would roll, and then who knows, maybe Salah or Palmer or Solanke, whoever it is, picks up an injury, and I can get Saka in a different way, and just keep hold of Mbuemo, because he's still going to continue to play 90 minutes every single week and be on penalty. So, long way of saying, no way I would sell Mbuemo this week. 14 onwards, I know people are considering it. Basically, I'm going to wing it, right? I don't see Mbuemo as a huge problem in my team. If I have to keep him for Villa away, Newcastle at home, Chelsea away, Forest at home, I think those fixtures are okay. Yes, the stats in the last 3 aren't good, but if I look at his stats over the season over on Hub, by the way, 30-day free trial at the moment and 30% off. Links in the description below as always. His non-penalty XG is down a bit on last year, 0.19, and his expected assist is 0.23. It's still not terrible for a player that always starts and always plays 90 and has penalties. Right? It's not as good as last year. If I bring those stats up, he was on 0.33 non-penalty expected goals per 90. But also, it's only been 12 games. And I'm not saying it's irrelevant to look at the stats from this season, but numbers can change, right? They could go back up. So I just don't see him as a massive problem. If I get to 14 or 15 and I want to keep Palmer, Salah, Fernandes, and I've got the money to go to Saka or Son from Mbuemo, then maybe I'll get rid of him. He's certainly not essential from 14 onwards like he felt from game week 6 onwards when Brentford had that really good fixture swing. But I also just don't think there's a huge amount of other standout options. Like the players mentioned in the question are fine, right? Anthony Gordon, good pick. Bowen, good pick as well. But I don't know if they're... I'm struggling to decide whether they're worth a transfer, which is why personally I just want to put the decision off until game week 14. Like Anthony Gordon, for example, like Palace away this week, that is not better than Leicester at home. And then when you get to game week 14 and Mbuemo's got Villa away, Gordon's got Liverpool at home. So there's no point in making that transfer. So then you're putting off until game week 15. And if you still at that point think the move is good, then of course go ahead and move him on. For Bowen, it's a little bit better because West Ham's fixture run gets good from 14 onwards. So you ignore him for Arsenal. No point in making the switch. And then if you really want to make the move in 14 and you've got the spare transfer, I really don't hate it. Bowen and Gordon are both players that are going to play... both players that are going to get regular starts, regular minutes throughout this Christmas period. I like both of them. Are they miles ahead of Mbuemo? I'm not sure they are. Now, if I had another wild card and I had to use it in game week 14, I'd be really tempted to go for Bowen or over Mbuemo if there was a choice between only those two. Because you've got Leicester away, Wolves at home, Bournemouth away, Brighton at home, Southampton away for West Ham. But that's a luxury move. That's how I would see it. That's how in short, that is how I feel about Mbuemo. Any transfer to get rid of him is a luxury. And if you've got that luxury from 14 onwards, do it. But don't look at that fixture run thinking, I've got to take hits to get rid of Mbuemo. I've got to get someone else. If I get to game week 14 and something else has cropped up, I'll just simply keep Mbuemo because 3 games is not enough to rule him out. So I like Gordon. No point looking at him now, I don't think, until game week 15. I like Bowen, but again, you're not really looking at him until game week 14. Just keep Mbuemo. It's Leicester at home. So who's the best captain for game week 13? So my top 4, not necessarily in this order, I'll talk about that in a minute, are Salah, Palmer, Saka and Mbuemo. I've not included Haaland at all, and it's not a massive overreaction to the fact that he's only got 2 goals since game week 6 because he's still putting up good numbers. The goals are coming. It's just the fixture, Liverpool away. Even if he'd scored like 6 goals in the last 6, I would still probably ignore him for captaincy. Like Liverpool defence is not perfect. We saw Southampton get a couple of goals against them, but this time they're at home, and I just wouldn't go there. And I wouldn't fall into the trap of thinking, okay, well, Haaland's not done very well. Everyone's going to go elsewhere. I'm going to go for him as a differential. That thinking can be useful sometimes, but not before you're about to play Liverpool away. So even if you've got Haaland, I don't think this is the week to do it. If you want to use him as a differential captain, do it in game week 14 for Forest at home. So I wouldn't include Haaland. For Saka, I think he's a decent option, but I don't think he's in the top 2 and maybe not even in the top 3. I think people are only considering him because of the 13-pointer against Forest. Now, do not get me wrong, right? That West Ham defence is there for the taking despite the result against Newcastle. Saka is, of course, capable of getting another 13-pointer plus. But if I'd asked you who you were going to captain in game week 13 after game week 10 or 11 when he got 2 points against Newcastle and Chelsea, I don't think anyone would have said Saka. They would have looked ahead to the fixtures and gone for someone else. So Saka is not bad, but I think people are knee-jerking a little bit because of what he's just done in game week 13. Now, to be fair, Odegaard is back now. Arsenal are looking very good. West Ham away is a good fixture, but I'd rather go for a home game when you've got 3 other good choices. So I would put Saka maybe 3rd ahead of Mbuemo, possibly even 4th behind Mbuemo. So I like Mbuemo versus Leicester at home, but he's probably not in my top 2. Salah versus Palmer is really interesting. When I bought Palmer and Salah in game week 10, my plan was to captain Salah in 10, 11 and 12, and then captain Palmer in 13 against Aston Villa at home, and then again against Southampton away in game week 14. What's happened since that thought process in game week 10? And I am reacting a little bit to what's gone on the last few weeks. Well, Salah has been an absolute joke. He's got 4 double-digit returns in the last 5 games, 8 in total for the season. He's averaging 10 points per game. But not only that, he's not got the worst record against Man City from what I can remember. And also, Man City are just conceding goals for fun. Like against Spurs, 1.38 expected goals conceded. Against Brighton, 2.29. They are there for the taking right now. And look, it could be a cagey game because Liverpool know, even just not losing that game puts them in such a good position moving forward for the league title. But I'm not sure that's how it's going to play out. So, given what's happened recently in terms of Salah's returns and City's defensive frailties, a lot of people now think that Salah's the best option. And I can't really argue with that. But I've got to be honest, I think I'm going to stick with Palmer as my captain. And the reason is, that was my original thought back in game week 10. Has enough changed since then? I'm not particularly worried about the fact that Palmer has 2 returns since game week 7. Because Arsenal at home, Man United away and Liverpool, I wouldn't have expected massive returns anyway. At home, he's blanked against City in game week 1. Fair enough, right? City were a different side then. Assist against Palace. 4 goals against Brighton. Assist against Forest. And 1 goal against Newcastle. The only other home game he's blanked in is Arsenal, which is fair enough. So his home record is pretty decent. I'm not expecting 4 goals. And I don't think Villa defence is all that either. Like, it's not going to be an easy game for Chelsea, but there will be chances. So because everyone's now going towards Salah, which I think is absolutely fair enough, I'm probably going to stick with a differential. Oh, Palmer's not a differential. He's got very high ownership. But in terms of captaincy, I think he will be somewhat of a differential this week. So I'm going to go for Palmer. Can I split Palmer and Salah in terms of who's the best? It's difficult, right? But I'm going to go for Palmer, I think. I reserve the right to change my mind, but that's how I'm thinking about it right now. So if I had all 4 of these players, I would go Palmer, then probably Salah, then Mbuemo, then Saka. But they're all really good choices. And if you've got your armband on one of these 4 players this week, you're probably looking pretty good. I don't think there's really anyone else to consider. João Pedro against Southampton, sorry. Problem is, there's likely to be an early sub there. So let me get my words out. As good as he is from a value perspective, I'm not sure he's captaincy material yet. Chris Wood against Ipswich, not terrible, but there's no way I would do that versus these other 4 players that I've spoken about. Fernandes versus Everton, maybe people would have taken that seriously after the 17-pointer, but not after the Ipswich performance. He'd have to do something special in the Europa League for people to go there. So, at the moment, I've got my armband on Palmer. I've even got the vice-captaincy on Mbuemo, just because I'm kind of tempted to go against Salah, but I don't think I can confidently say that Mbuemo is better than Salah. So that's what I'm doing. Let me know in the comments below, which player are you captaining this week? So what are your thoughts on Ollie Watkins? If you have him, is he a hold or sell given his price point and the number of good value forward options? Now, general thoughts about Watkins. He's a pretty consistent FPL pick in terms of returns versus games played, and I would expect that to continue. So far, he started all 12 matches and he's got 6 goals, 2 assists. So 8 attacking returns in 12 is not bad, and he's fully capable of doing something similar over the next 12. And when you're coming into the congested fixture period in December, it's nice to have a player that you know is going to start every game. Is there a possibility that Duran could start one of game week 14 or 15 against Brentford at home or Southampton at home, considering they've got a Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday turnaround? Possibly, but I think it's more likely that Watkins would start both of those and maybe be subbed off early. So all around, he's going to keep getting you points. But in terms of buying him, I think 9 million feels very expensive right now when you put into context how people are building their squads. Either you've got Haaland, in which case, if you're trying to fit in 1 or 2 premium midfielders, you probably can't afford Watkins as well. Or you haven't got Haaland, and so you've got 3 spare forward slots. But because you want to put so much money in midfield and maybe a little bit more in defence, it's hard to fit Watkins in. It's not impossible, of course, right? I could do Solanke to Watkins and then still afford Mbuemo to Saka by downgrading Saliba to a 4.5. So it's possible, but then I've got no money for other moves that I might want to do later on. Like, I don't really want to stick with Lewis and Greaves forever, and I'd like money to upgrade. So Watkins is fine, but I think, you know, a Solanke who's cheaper, an Isak who's cheaper, even a Havertz or Jackson, even with the 4 yellow card situation, are probably better value moving forward. That's the problem with Watkins. It's not that I expect him to stop getting points. I don't. I'm just not convinced he will get more than players that are cheaper. And that's the problem. I don't see him as a value pick. Last year, he absolutely smashed it, as we know, like 228 points, 18 assists. He was never going to keep that up. There were so many fantasy assists in there. He's a good pick, but not worth 9 million for me. Now, if you've got him, it's a different conversation. I wouldn't be in necessarily a rush to get rid of him because of those Brentford and Southampton games in 14 and 15. I see Watkins like Mbuemo. That's a luxury transfer. If you need the money to upgrade a midfielder or a defender or something like that to make your squad better overall, and you've got the spare transfers, absolutely fair enough. If after the Southampton game in 15, you want to move to someone like Isak instead, who has Leicester at home, Ipswich away, Villa at home, 16, 17, 18, again, fair enough. But I don't see this mad rush to get rid of him. Like, he's not got a huge amount of returns recently. It's only 1 goal in the last 4. But he's also played Spurs away and Liverpool away in that time. So I don't see it as a massive problem. Even against Palace, where he only scored 1 goal, he put up 1.3 XG, which is pretty decent. And overall, his numbers are just good. So that's my view on him. I wouldn't buy him. I can't really see any reason to do that. If I've got him, it's a luxury transfer. And that doesn't mean you can't transfer him out. You might have no other issues in your team. But I'd wait until you're at that point. If you've got injury, suspensions, just players that aren't starting, etc., that you need to move on first, and Watkins is not blocking you in terms of the money you've spent on him, I think it's fine to hold on to him a little while longer. He might not be better value than the likes of Havertz, Jackson, Isak, but he can definitely keep up in terms of points. So speaking of forwards, this is a good follow-up question. Who are the best 3 forwards to own right now? So I'm going to answer this from the angle that I've got a wild card for game week 13. If I was using it this week, who would I go for? João Pedro would definitely be in the team. I think at 5.6 million, the value is just too good to turn down. And he's almost certainly going to be 5.7 by the deadline. And if he does well against Southampton, it's more transfers in. It won't be that long until he's closer to 6 million plus, I would say. The fixture run is great. Is there a guarantee he starts every single one of those games? Absolutely not. Will he get subbed off early in most of those as well? Probably. But at 5.6 million, you can't expect the world. And when you've got penalties and a first choice forward for a good team, that's hard to turn down, right? And also at this point in time in FPL, lots of people's money is going into midfield. And so you don't need so much spent in the forward line. And ultimately, and I think I said this in pre-season, and I wish I'd stuck to this a bit more with my Game Week 1 team, the value at 6 million-ish, you know, for attackers is in the forward line. It's not in midfielders. Semenyo is not bad at all. Don't panic about him or anything like that after the suspension. Smith Rowe is not bad long-term either. Rodgers is good too. But in terms of, you know, João Pedro versus a Rodgers or Raul Jimenez versus a Rodgers, the value is in that forward line. Look at Chris Wood earlier this season. So he would definitely be in. I think despite blanking against West Ham, I'd probably have Isak as well. I'd go for him over Jackson because of the yellow card situation. I fully appreciate that Chelsea's fixtures are good, but if Jackson gets that suspension, it is just annoying. At least it would be for me. So that would make me prefer Isak. And again, when you're thinking about overall squad structures, you could say that Havertz is almost as good as Isak, but I know that if I was wildcarding, I would want triple Arsenal elsewhere. I'd want Raya, Gabriel and Saka most probably, or Timber, Gabriel, Saka, and therefore there's no room for Havertz. So that's why I would choose Isak, and he's a little bit cheaper than Watkins as well. And Watkins does have that Brentford at home, Southampton at home game in 14 and 15. But with Isak, you save a bit of money, you get penalties, and you've also got Brentford away, Leicester at home, and Ipswich away 15 to 17. I know Wilson is back now, but he's had hardly any minutes so far this season. I think it's clear to me that Isak is first choice. Maybe if Wilson can prove his fitness to Eddie Howe soon, maybe Isak gets rotated a little bit. But I think I'd rather wait to see that happen before I worry about it. So Isak would probably be in. The third forward is a bit more difficult. It certainly wouldn't be Haaland because I'd want those premium midfielders. If I was wildcarding, I guess I would put Cunha in probably. But at 7 million, like he's gone up quite a lot now. I think if you can still get the rest of the team you want with Cunha, he'd maybe be my third forward, but I wouldn't sacrifice other positions in my team to get him. I think he's really good. I think he'll continue to do well because the fixtures are good. But long term, I'm not particularly worried about him. And if I could get someone cheaper in instead, I'd consider it. Although right now, I'm not sure what cheap forward I would buy. Like Chris Wood has got Ipswich, but then City and United away. It's not ideal. You know, Danny Welbeck, I think there's maybe slight concerns in his minutes long term if Ferguson can stay fit and if João Pedro can stay fit. Watkins I've already spoken about. Raul Jimenez is good long term, but not right now. I still like Solanke, to be honest. But he's even more expensive than Cunha. Is Solanke worth 0.6 million over Cunha? I think long term he probably is, but maybe not in the short term. So I guess I've got to say Cunha. I think if I was going right now, I'd probably go for that forward line. Cunha, Isak and João Pedro. I'm probably missing someone, but I don't think I am. Like Strand Larsen, no. Delap, no. Visser, no. I think the only other option really is Jackson, or you go for Haaland or Watkins, but I just wouldn't want to spend that money. Now, before everyone rushes out and sells their forward, just because that might be the best forward line on paper, it doesn't mean your forwards need selling, right? Like I've got Solanke, for example. He's got Fulham at home. I'm not worried about selling him to anyone else. Raul Jimenez, there's no way I'd buy him right now, but long term he's good. And if you've got cover in the more difficult fixtures, you could keep hold of him. It's very similar to Vardiol. Would I buy him right now? I'd find that very difficult to do. But if I had him, I'd probably keep him for 40 and onwards. So the best three for me are probably João Pedro, Isak, and one more. Right now, I'd probably take Cunha, but I don't think he's as essential as everyone is making out. But it doesn't mean your forwards have to be sold straight away. If you've got Chris Wood this week, I would absolutely keep him, for example, for Ipswich at home. Let me know in the comments below who are your three favourite forwards. So given that Vicario is set for a long absence, is Fraser Forster now a viable option? He's only 4.3 million, could be a good enabler. So for anyone that hasn't seen, Vicario has had surgery on a fractured ankle. And like the question says, presumably is going to be out for a while. As far as I know, we don't yet have a timeline for how many games he's going to miss. The club tweet said that the medical staff are going to assess him for when he can come back to training. Surgery usually means you're going to be out for a little while. And because of the extra fixtures in December, I think we can assume he's probably not going to be back until maybe game week 21. So possibly Forster is an option. At 4.3, he's not massively cheaper than like a Verbruggen at Brighton. And I'm not convinced that Spurs' defence is massively better than Brighton. In fact, Brighton, you could say, possibly a little bit better, especially with Spurs now missing their main goalkeeper, Van de Ven, and possibly Romero. Forster is someone that I would consider if you happen to be making a goalkeeper transfer anyway, or possibly if you're on wildcard. But I'm just not sure there's a huge amount of value in going for like Forster and Fabianski. Like, how much is that really enabling versus just going for a definite first choice keeper from somewhere else? Like, once Vicario is back, Forster will obviously be out. And who knows, maybe they go and buy a new goalkeeper in January. I don't know how likely that is. If you're a Spurs fan and you've got a view on that, leave a comment below. I just don't... like, he's fine, right? And maybe if you're on wildcards, you'd go for Forster over Fabianski as your second goalkeeper. But I just can't. I don't look at that Spurs defence and think, right, I've got to do what I can to get Forster in. And goalkeeper transfers are usually one of the lowest priorities that people have. Like, even the next few fixtures, right? Fulham at home, Bournemouth away, Chelsea at home, Southampton away, Liverpool at home. Probably no clean sheet against Bournemouth, Chelsea or Liverpool. Against Fulham is going to be tough. Southampton away, maybe. I just don't see a huge amount of clean sheets. And I know I spoke about Porro this week and I said I wouldn't necessarily sell him. But as always, there's a difference between selling someone and buying them. So, I don't know. Maybe I just haven't thought about this enough or given it, enough time for how he might fit in. But I don't know. I didn't see that Vicario injury and think I've got to get Forster, to be honest with you. So, yeah, 4.3 is a good price. And as your first choice keeper over someone like a Raya or an Alisson or someone like that when he's back fit, that obviously does free up a lot of money. But I guess it depends what it's enabling. For me, having Forster instead of Raya doesn't really give me a huge amount. I can already get Saka, Palmer, Salah, Fernandes and still have Solanke, João Pedro up top. So it's not really a massive concern. Maybe there's something I'm missing. He's fine, right? If Vicario is out for a very long time. But I wouldn't worry about it too much right now. So I've got Rasmus Højlund. Should I keep him for one more week against Everton? If not, do I go for Jackson on 4 yellow cards or Isak, who blanked against West Ham? So on that final part of the question, I've answered that a few times already. I would definitely go for Isak over Jackson just because of the yellow card situation. If you're prepared to risk that and you've got 7 other really solid attackers that are always going to play, maybe Jackson is the slightly better choice. But I like the fixtures that Isak has got coming up. He's on penalties, which Jackson isn't. And he's not a threat of being suspended. With Højlund, if anyone else went there, I think you've probably got to sell him. Like, maybe if he starts on Thursday in the Europa League and he plays really well to the point where he can't be dropped, then I'd consider keeping him. But the fact that, under Ruud van Nistelrooy, he was playing pretty much every single game, and then all of a sudden Amorim comes in and puts Rashford up top and he scores in the first match, that doesn't bode well for future minutes. I don't think that Rashford played particularly well outside of the goal, but then none of the Man United team played particularly well. But I do think, long term, Højlund is going to be that number 9 for Man United, unless they make new transfers. I just think he's more of a forward than Rashford is. Rashford is better off the left. This has always been the case. There's never really been much of a time where he's been amazing in that number 9 position. He has played well there at times, but not really from what I can remember. And I'm an old man now, so maybe I'm misremembering. Not really for a massively consistent period. So I do think long-term Højlund will be the one, but I don't think it's worth the risk. I would just sell him if you've got the spare transfer. Would I hit him out? Unless there's any indication from Thursday's game that he's going to start the weekend, I maybe even would take a hit. Because after Everton at home, you've got Arsenal away, Forest at home, City away. Pretty bad fixtures, and you don't even know if he's going to start. So I think you cut your losses. I did speak at one point about going for Højlund as a differential. There was talk as soon as Amorim signed that he might use Rashford, so I guess that might have put me off. But I just think you put it down as a punt that's failed a little bit. These things happen. I would just deal with it. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. I'll be back tomorrow with team selection, and on Friday we'll have final thoughts earlier than normal because it's a Friday deadline. And if you have enjoyed this one and all the stuff I put out, make sure to give it a 5-star rating on podcast. And Fantasy Football Hub, links in the description below. Like I said, at the moment they've got a Green Friday deal, not Black Friday. 30% off, 30-day free trial. What more can you ask for? You can go and check out all of their tools and decide whether you like them or not. I'll leave it there. I'll be back tomorrow. Catch you then.